In the last episode, we looked at some questions, some budget and money questions, because it's absolutely essential when you're speaking to a prospective customer. To get straight into the meat of the discussion, we need to know what our expectations are concerning money, because there's no point in speaking to someone if our expectations are too far apart. And so that's why it's essential to get into these questions as early as possible. So now that we've wrapped up the part about the money conversations using Godwin, that's G Power's company as a case study, we're going to move on to some of the urgency questions that I explored with him. Now, if you remember from the previous episodes, the whole point about urgency questions are you need to find out what people's timeframes are, and you need to find out if this is a significant problem that they're trying to deal with in the first place. Because if they have no time frame, if the time frame is too long, and if it's not a big enough problem, then you're going to be causing unnecessary headache for yourself following up with people who are not going to make a decision anytime soon. And of course, you're going to be irritating the person on the other end because you're following up with them incessantly and they don't have any urgency around it. And maybe they're just trying to be nice and decent people, so they're not going to tell you in point terms to just faff off. So you have to take the initiative as a sales professional, as the wedding and event professional in this case, and bring up these sorts of issues. And so these are some of the things that I try to get G Power to take into account. So an example of an urgency question that I told him he could ask is, you could ask, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, is this really a problem you want to solve for now? Or are you guys okay with coping are you guys okay with coping with this load shedding for now? Now, in this scenario, of course, I've assumed that the people that he was speaking to have going through load shedding in their area. So you really want to know if they're comfortable with the load shedding. For instance, my wife just went to Lagos recently with the kids to spend some time with the grandparents, and there was some load shedding going on in the neighborhood, and it was 2 days on, 2 days off. Of course, since they already have generators and inverters, they had a way for coping. But there's some people who, even though they don't have alternative power solutions, I mean, they really don't mind living with the load shedding, even if it's 1 week on, 1 week off. So that was my advice, one of the bits of my advice that I gave to Godwin. So even if you're speaking to people, it looks like they can afford it because they live in the nice, swanky mansion. But you have to ask the question: are you guys? Is this a problem you want to solve, or are you guys okay with the load shedding? If they say, "Oh, we're perfectly fine with the load shedding," then you know that you just stop the conversation and move on because they are not going to make a decision anytime soon. So it's the same for us when it comes to wedding industry professionals. Here's a question that we have to ask. An example that I'm going to give is something that I came across in within the last couple of weeks, let's say within the last month or so. There was a couple that I was speaking with, the Caucasian couple, and so I had to flat out ask at some point that, okay, is this actually a problem that you guys are trying to solve? Do you even really need a wedding photographer? Because you said that it's going to be a small wedding party of 20 people, so do you really need a wedding photographer? And the bride came out and said, well, actually, we don't. Our host is not comfortable with the idea. We're only having 20 people, and to be frank, our mobile phone photographs are going to be good enough anyway. And so I called their bluff and I said, okay, that's fine. No wahala, no problem. And we eased off of the conversation. Of course, I still kept in touch with her from time to time. And I found out after the wedding that indeed that was the case, that all they had were mobile phone photographs. Now, to their credit, the photos that they took with their mobile phones were actually quite good. And this is just an example of one of the situations where you actually have to ask these questions up front instead of following up with people incessantly. So it's the same for those of you who are, let's say, wedding planners, for instance. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet and ask the question. We've been hemming and hawing and going back and forth over these issues for a couple of weeks now. Are you sure you really want to have a wedding planner? Is that a problem you really want to solve? Or are you just counting on the fact that you have a large family of sisters and you think they can sort everything out? And a couple of things are going to happen. One thing she might say is that, oh, yes, we actually are interested, but the reason why I haven't been forthcoming is because of this, this, and that. And now you know where you stand. Or she might say, well, yes, actually, my aunties have been saying they can plan the wedding themselves. And in that case, you know that you are not speaking with someone who is likely to buy anytime soon. So this is one example of urgency questions that you can ask. Find out if there's a problem that they really want to solve, or if they're okay just coping with the situation the way it is. In the next episode, we're going to go over 2 or 3 other urgency type questions that you can use when speaking to prospects. I decided to switch up the format and not treat all of them in this episode, just so that you have easy, snackable content that you can listen to and apply directly in your sales process. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based wedding photographer, Tavishima Ayede. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'll catch you on the next episode.